Welcome to the Smart College Buyer Podcast. My mission is to help high school families pay for college without taking on a truckload of debt. Each episode, I'll share insights into college admissions, financial aid, payment strategies, and more, often with expert guests. I'm Jack Wang, your host. I started helping families after struggling to navigate the process myself for my sons. If I needed help, I knew others did too. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to this episode of the Smart College Buyer Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jack Wang. And this year, for this episode, we're recording live from FinCon 23 from New Orleans, Louisiana, or I guess I should say New Orleans, right? I don't really have the accent quite down. New Orleans, Louisiana. But I'm really excited about this episode because I have my good friend who has an area of knowledge that I don't have, but yet is super important for families thinking about college. And so I want to take a moment to introduce my friend Kate Horrell of King's High Media. And her particular area of expertise is around working with veteran families or military families, and in particular using VA benefits to pay for college. So first things first, so Kate, take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. So my name again is Kate, and I am an accredited financial counselor. I'm also a chartered financial consultant and a military qualified financial planner. You got to put all the letters behind your name.
There's a lot of letters.
But more importantly, my husband served in the Navy for 30 years, and we have 4 children. And VA educational benefits were one of the ways that we got them through college. So I not only have a professional interest in VA educational benefits, but I have a very personal interest in making sure that I understand them and how they work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get into that in just a moment, but I know that you have a blog, but you also write for other outlets.
Yep.
Right? So that can all be found at katehorrell.com. So her information will be in the show notes. But let's get into it. So, as I talk to families about college, I don't run into this very often. So this is not an area that I really know a lot about. Yet, going to the military or having a family, like a parent who's a veteran, there are a lot of benefits that can be used to pay for college, as you guys did. So can you just walk our audience through some of the real kind of basic, like what the basic benefits are, so just people have a clear idea of sort of what this even means to begin with?
Sure. So there are a few different ways that military family members may have access to educational benefits through the VA. The most common one is the post 9/11 GI Bill. Most of us have heard of the GI Bill. Maybe it was our grandparents. But the post 9/11 GI Bill came out after 9/11, in the time frame after that. And in 2009, in order to recruit and retrain troops and keep them in the military, they gave service members the option to transfer some or all of their education benefits to certain family members, children and spouses. So for military families, having access to these transferred post 9/11 GI Bill benefits is phenomenally huge. And that would be but that is the most common VA educational benefit. Then if a service member is 100% disabled, their dependents, their spouse and children may be eligible for something called DEA, Survivors and Dependents Educational Benefits. That's a different program that people may have access to. And then for the survivors of those who were killed while they were serving, there is a third program called the Fry Scholarship. And hopefully those people know that exists, but there are times that they don't.
Right. And so primarily you're talking about active duty, like full-time active duty. And I don't necessarily want to get too far into the weeds here, but I know that there are other programs for like National Guard or other forms of military service. So can you just briefly touch on some of those other programs that might be available to someone who only serves in the National Guard?
Yes. So Guard and Reservists also can earn the post 9/11 GI Bill, and they are also eligible to transfer it to their eligible beneficiaries, spouse and children. The big difference for them is they may not accrue it at 100% of the benefit. So you need 36 months of full-time service to get 100% of the GI Bill benefit. So if you are a Guard or reservist who maybe gets deployed for a year, perhaps you don't earn the whole 36 months. Maybe you have a smaller percentage, you don't have 100% of it. And that's a whole, as you said, really getting into the weeds, but just something to be aware of.
Right. Now, so let's talk mainly about the post 9/11 GI Bill. So give our audience an idea of sort of what does that mean in terms of dollars and cents, or like the percent of tuition that it might cover?
Yeah. So there are three primary parts to the post 9/11 GI Bill. One of them is tuition, one of them is a monthly housing allowance, and one of them is a books allowance. The books allowance is up to $1,000 a year, so it's not inconsequential, but it's not the big thing that's making the GI Bill amazing. Tuition is either up to in-state tuition for a state school, and if you're using GI Bill benefits, you almost always are eligible for in-state tuition. There's a federal law that makes that happen. If you go to a private school, there is up to a dollar cap. This year it's in the $27,000 a year range. But then there's a special program that allows schools to top that money up. So in many cases at a private school, the post 9/11 GI Bill could pay all of tuition. And then in addition, there's a monthly allowance that helps to offset the cost of room and board.
Right. So yeah, because I know that so this is a really important benefit. Obviously for our veteran families, right, military families, they have sacrificed a lot. So this is like the least we can do, right? This is one thing that we can do, right, which is a good thing. But I think sometimes the common misconception is that, VA benefits automatically pay for all of college, but you're saying that that's not, that might be true maybe at an in-state school, not necessarily true at a private, can be. But what happens if you have multiple children? Like in your situation, you have 4 kids, right? So does the VA benefit pay in full for all 4, or do you somehow split it?
So in the case of the post 9/11 GI Bill, the service member has earned one benefit, 36 months, again, typically at 100% of 36 months, but it might be 40 or 50% of 36 months. And they can choose how to allocate that benefit within their family. This is really where I work with families often, is that they're trying to map out a plan to get 4 kids through college, and they have 36 months of the GI Bill. Obviously, we can all divide. And so they need to figure out, does it make more sense for Susie to use this benefit? A lot of people just want to divide by the number of children, and they'll say, well, everybody gets 9 months.
Right.
Almost never the most advantageous way to do it. Some schools are more expensive. Some schools have larger housing allowances. Some schools you might be able to get in-state tuition if you just use a little bit of the benefit, but you don't use the rest of it, but you get to keep that in-state tuition. So it turns into a very unpredictable and slightly complex thing of, is this student very academically competitive? Are they going to get a lot of merit aid? Perhaps mom or dad is going to retire while this student is college. Their income is going to drop. They might be eligible for more need-based aid. I'm sure you've talked about displacement and stacking, right? This factors into how the GI Bill gets used best for each family member.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I love that, because it's not just a matter of take the benefit, divide by 4 in your case, right? Although families could certainly do that, it may not necessarily be the most efficient way to go.
Right.
Plus, I suppose it presumes that you love your children equally. Right now, Kate, I won't ask you if that's actually true, but that's not always true for a lot of families, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. But, and all kidding aside, kids may want to go do different things, right? So maybe dividing by the number of kids doesn't always make sense just from that perspective. So I guess to a certain extent, I know obviously people can engage you because this is what you do, right? But how would a family even begin to go about figuring out some of this stuff, right? Like, should they contact the school, or is there some other resource or something? Where would they even start?
There are a lot of resources out there. Every school has what's called school certifying official. I almost got it confused with another military acronym, a school certifying official. And that is an individual who works for the school, who's been trained by the Department of Veteran Affairs and acts as the liaison between the school and the VA. They have access to workbooks and handbooks and people to ask questions of. They are your ally in this process. And if you have, say, a senior who's looking at schools and you think you may want to use some VA benefits, if you know you have access to them, reach out to your school certifying official. I always joke, if you decide your kid's going to school there, show up with coffee and donuts one day, when you're there for Parents Weekend, because you may want these people to remember you in a future year.
Right.
The VA website is pretty darn good. They've got some great tools that help you figure out what schools accept the GI Bill, which is basically all schools, what type of benefits you'll get at that school, what schools participate in that top-up yellow ribbon program that will give you benefits beyond the GI Bill. And they've got comparison tools that you can compare schools to each other. It does not obviously hit every nuance of every specific situation. And that's where you're going to want to use your school certifying official or a financial counselor who has expertise in this area.
I mean, because this can be this is fascinating stuff and so important, but it's also can be so confusing for families, right? So let me ask you, let's sort of switch gears to just a little bit, still on this topic, but what are some of the common mistakes, even before families sort of get into divide by number of kids, but what are some of the common mistakes that families either do or start down the path of, even before they start even thinking about this?
So particularly with the post-9/11 GI Bill, there's 3 common mistakes that happen. First of all, when the service member transfers it, there's rules for them to transfer, and they need to be met. They need to transfer at the right point in their career. They need to transfer it to eligible people, and then they have a service obligation. This isn't just a freebie. They're agreeing to serve for another 4 years. And if they serve for 3 years and 364 days, they don't have that benefit. So making sure that the benefit has been appropriately transferred and that the service obligation has been met is crucial. The next thing that people often do is they don't learn about the benefit before they start using it. And again, it gets back into strategy. You can't build a strategy around something you don't understand. And the third one is to have this misconception that it's going to pay for everything. Particularly in the case of room and board bills are, at most schools, they're going to want you to pay those in July or August for that first semester. The housing allowance is paid in arrears on a monthly basis. So if school doesn't start until September 1st, your first monthly housing allowance payment isn't going to come till the end of September. And if you haven't planned for that, you're going to be in for a little surprise when the school wants their bill paid in August.
Right. Well, I mean, the school wants their money.
Yeah.
Right. So, whether it comes monthly or they're going to want their money up front. Right. And it's fascinating. I guess around so let's talk a little bit around the 36-month certificate mark and stuff. Do you get a lot of questions around that? Are there a lot of confusions around whether families have sort of met that time requirement? So
the VA is exceptionally good at part of this and a little bit really bad at it. Every time you use VA education benefits, they send you a statement. Before you get started, you have to request a certificate of entitlement. They send you a paper document that you give to the school. You usually upload it to a portal. You don't usually give them the paper document. But it says, this is the name of the student, this is how many benefits they have, and then when you use the benefits, they send you another statement that says, let's say it's a fall semester, it might say you've used 3 months and 16 days of your GI Bill benefits, and we paid out this much money to the school, and this is how many months and days you have remaining. That works 99.9% of the time, but there is that very small portion of people that the VA's computers are lacking some piece of information, and those statements are wrong. So I encourage families to do their own due diligence. Just like you would do with any other financial transaction, you're not going to trust the other people. You're going to make sure that their numbers are right. You want to make sure that your numbers are right when you get those statements from the VA.
Right, yeah. Well, it is the government, right? I mean, so there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of very specific processes you have to follow and stuff. And mistakes do happen. Yeah, it's a lot, though. Now, in the case of a family with multiple children, right, you might know your oldest, maybe your oldest is getting close to college, so you maybe have an idea of what that child wants to study and maybe have an idea of where they want to go. And you can start looking at, whether these schools have the yellow ribbon program or whatever. But in many cases, you don't often know what the younger children are going to do, right? So in trying to allocate these benefits efficiently, how do you counsel families around that? Because kid number 2 might go to trade school, which is a great choice, right? Like, not knocking that at all. That's a great choice. But the amount
or they might go to Harvard.
Or they might go to Harvard, right? Either way. So how do you work? I guess the bottom line is, how do you work around that?
So the first thing I encourage families to remember is that just like every decision we make in life, you make the best decision you can with the information you have right now. And there's no value in going back and beating yourself up about it if it turns out in the long run that maybe you could have done this a little bit differently. And so if you come into the process with that mindset, the other thing is to weigh out all of your factors. In some cases, particularly in the cases of service members who might be leaving the service before that next child comes along, they might know that their income is going to drop or increase, more frequently increase, when they move from the military world to the civilian world. So maybe that's part of their planning strategy. Well, we know we're going to be able to cash flow kid number 2, regardless of where they go to school. But right now, we need this benefit. The other thing that is often a factor is tax credits, right? In order to take advantage of certain tax credits, you need to be in the right income bracket, but you also have to have expenses. You can't take a tax credit for an expense that somebody else has paid. So that also becomes part of the strategy. A lot of families will split it up, but split it up a little more strategically than that 9 months, 9 months, 9 months, for example. I usually encourage clients to always keep at least one semester of benefits for each kid, because that may be the ticket to in-state tuition somewhere. And that can be a really big deal. And so that is, that's one planning strategy that I use and say, keep 1 month's worth of benefits for each kid. Keep in mind that the service member always has the right to revoke or change within their beneficiaries, as long as they're eligible beneficiaries, even after they leave the service, as long as they had been allocated to their spouse and each of their children, they can move the benefits around between the kids and the spouse. But they can also return them back to themselves. One thing I counsel service members and their spouses about a lot, or veterans and their spouses, is sometimes the highest and best use of the GI Bill is for mom or dad to go to school. And there seems to be this natural inclination for parents want what's best for their kids.
Right, sure.
And they want to hold on to this benefit because they think, well, we want to make sure Jimmy and Susie go to college. But if you can increase your earning potential by $20,000 or $40,000 or $60,000 a year by going to school, well, that's probably makes more sense financially.
Right. Yeah, and and that's really interesting, because I think the natural, and I certainly know what the audience and the families that come to me is, they think about their kids, right? The topic of mom and dad going back for like an MBA or graduate level degree or PhD doesn't always come up because we're focused on the kids. But you're absolutely right, though. I mean, that might be the best thing for the family, to increase the earnings potential of the parents, and then let the kids there's other strategies to pay for college, right? Just beyond just VA benefit. So that's really interesting. And I do have to say also that I love about the fact that you brought up taxes, but I think that oftentimes is an overlooked expense, if you will. People think about college in terms of tuition, room, board, fees, right? Things that directly associate with that college, but college is an after-tax cost. So if you can reduce the amount of taxes you're going to pay the IRS anyway through a tax credit, through some of these strategies, hey, that's money, right? I call that an IRS scholarship, no essay required, but it's important, right? It's a factor. It can be a huge dollar amount. So interesting. So I guess, and I know we've kind of touched upon this a little bit. I want you to kind of dig in just a little bit more here, but are there other factors that families should consider when they're trying to figure out this in terms of splitting their VA benefits among their children or themselves, right? beyond sort of what we already talked about? Are there other things that maybe that tend to get overlooked, but families should consider?
Yeah, so I have a list of 10 questions, and I'm probably not going to remember all 10 of them, but it's right. Who are your eligible people that might want to go to school, including mom and dad? Is grad school a consideration for anyone? Often grad school is a better use of the GI Bill benefits than undergrad. You may be able to get merit aid or state aid to pay for an undergraduate education that may not be available depending on what the graduate degree is. Who's academically competitive, as we've talked about? What other assets does the family have, and what assets are tied to the student, and what assets can be shifted around as need be? So, for example, Pell Grants, if their students were available to a Pell Grant, is tied to that student. You can't shift that money to someone else. 529 money can be shifted between people. So that becomes a really important part of, or cash flow from the family. They may be able to bank it this year and use it next year, or use it this year and then next year they want to, they're going to be a little tighter next year. A little bit of financial planning forecasting comes into this. What are mom and dad's income and expenses look like? Maybe your mortgage is getting paid off in 5 years. Let's go ahead and use that GI Bill for my senior this year.
Yep.
We'll take that mortgage payment to pay for my student who isn't starting school until after the mortgage is paid off.
Right.
Tax law is one of them. Location is one of them. The amount of the housing allowance. The amount of the housing allowance is based on the zip code of the school. This year, they range from under $1,000 a month to about $4,600 a month, depending on the zip code of the school.
Wow.
So if you have a kid going to school in San Francisco, that may be a deciding factor for you, that housing allowance makes more sense to use your GI Bill to get that very large housing allowance than their twin sister who's going to school in Oklahoma, right? Just a different situation. So there are a lot of factors to consider, but also the big thing is there's no wrong answers. This is a tremendous gift for our military and veteran families. And even if you don't max it out, you've still gotten a huge benefit.
Right.
And sometimes the best benefit involves leaving a few benefits on the table. Maybe the way you end up using it, you leave 3 or 4 months that don't get used. And people go, well, we've wasted 4 months. I'm like, yeah, but you used it at your kid in San Francisco. Like, you didn't waste anything.
Right. Yeah. I didn't realize the variation in the housing allowances so much. Now, before I get to that, one of the questions I did have is, can you use your VA benefit or the education benefit towards graduate school? So the answer to that is yes.
Yep.
Subject to sort of the similar rules and everything
And the
else.
other big key for graduate school is that children typically age out at 26. There are a few little exceptions, but I would never assume that your child is going to fall under one of those exceptions. So from a planning perspective, for example, I have a child who's graduating in May. Woohoo!
Congratulations.
She wants to take a few years off before she goes to grad school. And I said, well, let's define a few.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we have some VA benefits left that can be used for her to go to grad school, but she's going to age out when she turns 26.
Right. So take a month off. You're going to grad school.
Take the summer. You can start again in August.
Yeah, exactly. And again, back to the housing allowance, I have no idea. I mean, that's pretty attractive because I know, like, for example, the West Coast, it's a very high-cost area, and no hate against them, and certainly the Midwest and, like, the Southwest, like Oklahoma, is a very low-cost area, no hate against them, but if
then you get up into Boston.
Right, and then Boston is
New
high-cost
York,
area. Yep.
Very high cost of living.
But if the housing allowance, let's say, is $4,600, and I use that to go get a nice apartment, I may just go back to graduate school
You live in
myself.
the dorms.
Oh, darn.
And you bank that money for your sibling.
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's much smarter versus the idea I was thinking. Yeah, go with her on that idea. I was thinking more like luxury apartment overlooking something.
I don't know. You can get that in San Francisco for $4,600.
Well, you can cut down the cost a lot, but yeah. So yeah, she's far more fiscally responsible in that line of thinking than I am. So listen to Kate, don't listen to me on that. No, but that's really interesting though, and so you're right. So that makes a huge difference, right? And I didn't think about that before, because even in the sort of the non-GI Bill world, there are variations in costs, the housing costs, like room board at colleges. Obviously, if you're in like New York City, it's higher than in Oklahoma City. But I didn't realize that the allowance that they give you is such a very...
Now, that's only true for the post 9/11 GI Bill. The DEA program is a flat rate cash payment, is not tied to your tuition or your housing amount or how much books you have. You just get that amount every month. It's a very different program.
Oklahoma City it is then, I
exactly.
guess, for those folks. Okay. All right, interesting. So I guess as we kind of wrap up here a little bit, so Kate, I mean, this is great information, right? And so confusing, but this is super helpful. I know I've learned a lot. But I guess my last question to you is, what are what are some final things, like final thoughts that you may have for families who might be in this situation, or hey, or something like in the category of, if you learn nothing else from this except for this one thing, what's that one thing?
Well, it's not actually going to be about VA benefits at all.
Okay.
And I think you probably tell your clients this anyway. Have a financial plan before your kid accepts that college. Have a financial plan before your kid starts at that college. And don't just figure out how you're going to get through freshman year. I want you to map out a financial plan to get them through 4 years. Because one of the most heartbreaking things for me is when someone comes to me, their kid is it's Christmas of their kid's junior year and they've run out of money and their funding sources have dried up and they're in a panic. And this is just like heartbreaking. So if I can encourage people to plan out 4 years of how you're going to pay for this before you say yes to the dress or say yes to the school, then that would make everybody's life so much better.
That is a great point. So here at FinCon, there's lots of people here. There's great content creators. There's a lot of vendors here, and there's a company here that does help with borrowers manage their student loans with different strategies. I won't name them, but they're fairly well known in the industry, and their booth is, I think, a couple booths down from where we're sitting. And I know them, and they're great people. Okay, but the non-joke is that the more families talk to you or me ahead of time, the less they need to talk to them.
That's true.
Right? Like you either figure this out on the front end or you have to pay for it on the back end. Right? It's one or the other. Right? And you're right. So many families that come to me and that I talk to, they're thinking about, how do I get my kid into school? I'm like, no, you got to get your kid through school. Not just to school, but through school.
So money... grades if they get merit-based aid. Sometimes those scholarships are hard to hold on to.
Right.
And what's your backup plan if your kid can't keep that 3.5?
Right. Which is harder in college than it is in high school in most colleges. So
organic chemistry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's hard. And thankfully I did not have to take that, but I know plenty of kids who did, and then end up changing their major afterwards as a result because it really just kicked their rear end.
It really does.
Yeah. So, Kate, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I mean, this information was phenomenal. I love the fact that we're actually able to do it here at FinCon.
I know, it's fun.
But, I know that we've talked. I know we met last year, but I know we've talked a couple times over Zoom, but it's always so wonderful to be able to see people in person, do this, record this in person.
Talk to y'all.
Talk to the audience, and then just get this great information that's so important for our military families, right? I couldn't even begin to have talked about what you talked about. So I love the fact that you have this expertise. I mean, and by the way, just for everybody who knows, right, Kate does more than just college benefits. So she helps military families with their finances. So if you're a military family, veteran family, you need just help with your finances in general, talk to Kate.
Come see my blog.
Right, talk to Kate. But the fact that you have this particular expertise is so valuable.
Well, thanks. Right. I'm really glad that you invited me to come on. Yeah. Maybe we'll do it again next year.
Absolutely. No, this is great. No. And again, I want to say thank you all for listening or watching this podcast, however you're getting this podcast. Thank you for taking a moment out of your day to listen to this great information. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Smart College Buyer podcast. I hope you found the information useful for your family. Follow me on LinkedIn for more episodes, videos, and tips. The link is in the show notes. Remember, you can spend time now to plan and strategize, or you can spend more money later. Success in college admissions and financial aid isn't about luck. It's about being intentional. I'm here to help you every step of the way.